Hello and welcome back to Fred in the Shed 1. Now in this video I want to look at a really cheap smartwatch, and I really do mean cheap, because if you haven't noticed, these cheap sort of smartwatches from China have got ridiculously cheap on eBay and on Amazon. So I thought I might just get one in and just see basically how bad it is, because I mean you can't really get a lot for your money, can you, when we're talking these prices? And I didn't want to get one of these watches that are trying to emulate a Apple Watch, for example. I just think that's a little bit sad if you're walking around with not the real thing sort of on your wrist. So I wanted to choose one that was pretty generic and certainly the cheapest price that I could, but I didn't want one that was a homage to any particular make. The watch I settled on doesn't even have a brand name. It's just known as the DZ09, and it is an incredible £6.19 delivered to the UK. And it's just amazing how they can produce something for this cost. I mean, £6 is only really the price of a beer in a decent pub. And for you American viewers there, that's basically $8.05. So it's an $8 smartwatch. I mean, it's going to be pretty bad when it arrives, I know that. But I just wanted to sort of see what you can get for your money. And surprisingly, you appear to get quite a lot. I mean, firstly, the watch is available in 4 colours. There's sort of a white version, it's quite sort of sporty. Then there's a kind of a bronzy gold version. There's a black version that I was going to buy, but that wasn't currently in stock. So in the end, I settled for the sort of black wrist strap and the kind of brushed sort of silver aluminium effect. And I don't suppose that's going to be real aluminium for you, sort of £6. But that's the one that I ordered in. Looking at the specs for this watch, it's pretty amazing actually. I mean, it claims to be a full independent working device, and if you put a SIM card in the back of it, you can sort of make and receive phone calls and also use it for SMS text messaging, all for £6. So yeah, quite interested to get this in. Now, you know, I don't expect it to be a very, very good quality at all. You know, it has to be some sort of savings somewhere to make this sort of so cheap. But at the end of the day, if it basically sort of is able to display incoming calls and display your text messages, your Facebook, Twitter, stuff like that, that's really all you're going to use the watch for. That's what I use basically my smartwatch for. Now, unfortunately, despite all of these features that the watches claim to do, it is an Android device, and that is very important to sort of say this at this part of the video. I am basically an Apple user, so a lot of these sort of features where this connects to the phone itself, these aren't going to work for my phone. But in saying that, you know, I think you can still use this sort of sleep monitor here. It must have a sort of a motion sensor in it, and also the pedometer as well, if you go out to, you know, measure your steps and sort of stuff like that. It's just a few of the other features I won't be able to test, because it is an Android device, and it's the same for all of these sort of cheap watches. Apple unfortunately do not tolerate these sort of third-party, slightly dodgy sort of software kind of installs on their devices. This is quite interesting. It claims to be some kind of a monitor here that can actually sort of monitor your work sort of progress, and if you're working too hard, it's going to tell you. I'm not so sure about that. Now, you know, hopefully I won't end up looking like this guy holding my head. I'm not really expecting a great deal. Come on, you know, £6, $8, you know, it's not going to be great. But it did arrive, it turned up, yep, as promised, 3 weeks, UK post, and it arrived. So let's get straight into it. Let's actually open it up and sort of see how bad it really is. So, as you'd expect, there's no display box or anything like that. Everything arrives in a plastic sort of jiffy bag, but I mean, that's fine at this sort of price point. So we've got the watch itself with a little bit of protection around it, and then in the bag, got the USB lead for charging. It's just a generic lead, so this one you don't have to use it. And you've got the instructions themselves. Always a bit of a laugh, these Chinese instructions. And of course, they're in a sort of a pidgin English. So, right, first look at the watch itself. And it doesn't look too bad actually when you take the cover off. The outside sort of bezel sort of seems to be made from steel. It's not sort of plastic, and the crystal, I imagine it's a plastic. It looks a bit like glass, but it seems sort of quite nice and clear, and it feels pretty good for, I mean, for £6 you can't really sort of moan at it. I mean, what can you say? It looks a lot more expensive than the price would suggest. I mean, when you get to the back of the watch, obviously you've got one of these sort of rubberized plastic strap. That feels okay, but it seems permanently attached to the watch, so you can't change it if you break it. And yeah, you can see the price sort of savings when you get to the back of the watch. Everything is plastic. The back of the watch, unfortunately, is just a sort of piece of resin plastic. It's a shame that's not a screwed down piece of metal. And likewise, the charging port cover, yeah, it's a little bit how you're doing. It's sort of, it does almost sort of fall out, and I can see that maybe, getting lost if you gave this to a child or something. So, overall first impression, well, I mean, come on, for this sort of money, it's much better than I expected. It doesn't look particularly cheap. It's just a shame that it's got that rather nasty sort of resin plastic back. Right, I'm going to switch it on now and we'll hear it boot up. That's a little bit loud, isn't it? That could be quite annoying, switching it on every morning, so you're probably just going to leave this thing on all the time. But, once again, the screen is quite bright and it's quite clear, and it's surprisingly responsive to the touch. I think it must be a capacitive system, but when you swipe it across, it actually is not bad. It reacts a lot quicker than I thought it would. I've had smartphones that were worse than this. Included on the watch front is the 2D barcode, and this would take you to the website and allow you to download that important Android software, which unfortunately, because I'm iOS here and Apple, I can't demonstrate that. But that's a bit of a shame, but there are some of the other sort of apps you can use on the phone, like the sleep timer here, if you used to do so, and it's also got a pedometer as well, so it will count your steps, and those are available even if you haven't got the Android app. Because this is a standalone device, if you insert a SIM card, of course you can make calls from this watch. It has a microphone and also a speaker, which we'll be hearing a little bit later. You're going to look a little bit odd speaking into your wrist, but it is possible. Now, one feature that I wanted to try was that the watch has a built-in camera. The lens is at the top of the bezel, which sort of makes kind of framing pictures quite difficult, because you can't always sort of see what you're doing, but it is sort of possible. And anyway, I did go outside and take some sort of pictures with the watch itself, and to be fair, when I played the pictures back on the watch screen, it didn't look sort of too bad, but it wasn't until I downloaded them that the lack of pixels becomes pretty relevant. I think this is something like 320 by 240, so they are rather pixelated, and to be honest, not really much use. This is not something you're going to do all the time. You wouldn't take your holiday snaps on this, so yet again, perhaps another feature for the kids. And likewise is the built-in calculator app. This is sort of a throwback to sort of retro watches. Unfortunately, it doesn't do this particularly well. The numbers aren't particularly easy to see on the keypad, and it's very, very sort of fiddly. But in fairness, it does work. I mean, obviously you'd use the calculator on your phone, but yeah, it's kind of there, but it's very gimmicky. Now, one feature that I use all the time on my Pebble smartwatch is the ability to turn your phone's music on and off like a remote control. And a bit odd, I kind of tried this on the watch and it did turn the music on and off on the phone, but the sound comes through the watch's speaker, so have a listen.
Then he ran his hands through his hair.
So, the phone is kind of using the watch like a sort of Bluetooth speaker, but it was fairly clear when it came out. But would you want to listen to music through your wrist? I doubt that very much. By using the watch's micro SD card, you're able to record voice memos, which can be quite sort of useful, and then it plays it back through the watch's speaker. So I did one of those, and let's have a quick listen to that.
This is a test of the sound being recorded and played back on the smartwatch.
Well, that didn't come out half bad. My voice was fairly loud and clear. Now, the watch does have an alarm feature as well, which is a little tricky to set, but again, that is quite loud and the watch vibrates and it will certainly wake you up. Other than looking at all your apps, the watch does come with 3 built-in sort of conventional type watch faces, and I imagine that when you've got the Android app on your phone, you can choose a whole lot more. It does switch off, of course, after a while to save your battery, so you have to sort of keep tapping it. That's a bit of a letdown. Unfortunately, most of these sort of OED watches are always sort of the same. Now here it is on my wrist, and I've got an exceptionally skinny wrist, so forgive me for that, but you can sort of see it next to my Pebble smartwatch, and it is a little bit bigger than a Pebble, but it doesn't look sort of too bad, does it? I mean, it certainly isn't massive like some of these great watches are. To use the standalone features of the watch, such as the camera and the voice recorder, you have to go inside and fit a mini SD card. Now this was the bit I didn't really enjoy. The back of this watch feels incredibly flimsy. I don't think it's going to stand too many snap-offs and snap-ons. And you've just got a standard lithium-ion battery. Now it does claim to be able to use for a full day on one charge, and I used it for about sort of 5 or 6 hours mucking about with it for this video, and the battery only went down 1 bar, so that's probably more than possible. So looking in here, you can see on the left you've got the SD slot there for the memory card, and then you've got a standard sort of mini SIM slot, which if you put that in, you can use the standalone features such as the sort of phone on the watch itself, and also for SMS text messages. Now, one thing to remember is to insert your cards before you change any settings on the watch, because the watch doesn't have a capacitor, so as soon as you remove the battery, you lose all of your settings. Right, I think it's time to wrap this one up. Let's do the positives and negatives. Well, the negatives, I don't like the snap-on, snap-off resin black plastic back. I think they could have saved a few cents by removing the camera and put on a sort of an aluminium screw on a fit. That would have been much better. The watch band itself is a rubberized strap. It feels fine when it's new, but in my experience, these cheap straps tend to sort of dry out and crack. And when it does snap, well, then you're buggered because it's not held on with any roll pins, so you can't change it. But, do you know what? If this watch was shipping for around about, say, £35, $43, something like that, I think those points would be quite valid. But I mean, come on, it's £6, $8 delivered to your door. And it looks pretty decent, actually, on the wrist, and that screen is sort of quite bright. Yeah, it's not an Apple Watch, and it hasn't got the resolution of, say, a Fitbit or a Samsung watch, but it is quite readable. And when you sort of flicked and swipe, it actually is quite responsive. I was pretty much surprised. So, overall, I think this watch would probably sort of suit maybe like the pre-teenage market, sort of kids that would just want something to sort of play about with. For the price of just a little bit more than a McDonald's Happy Meal, I think it would certainly keep them amused for longer than that would. But maybe there's another market as well, maybe the more mature owner. Now, if you're perhaps a little bit like me and you're often out in the shed working on projects or sort of doing sort of heavy sort of work in the garden, well, I don't want to really carry my sort of phone around. So as long as you're on the Android system, you can just leave your phone indoors and just put this on your wrist, and you'll be able to get sort of notifications for incoming calls, text messaging, sort of things like that. And it just saves sort of carrying your phone around. So for £6, if you damage it, well, it's no big deal, is it? And you know what? I think that is the final word, because although this watch does feel incredibly cheap in places like the back plastic plate, well, it is a cheap watch. It is a cheap little gadget, something to sort of play around with. And incidentally, if you like the look of the other smartwatch that I was wearing, that is called a Pebble Still. And a little while ago, I bought 4 of those with problems, non-functioning, on eBay for less than 20 quid. And I was able to easily resurrect 3 of them. And I made a video about that. And I'll be leaving the little link that pops up at the end. So perhaps go away and check that out if you're interested in smartwatches. But that's about it. I would like to say, as always, cheers, thanks for watching. Please give the video the thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to see more gadgety videos, because I've got a few more gadgets on the way, and there's a few more coming up. And of course, as always, thanks for your time, thanks for watching, cheers, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next one.